Okay, welcome to another Affinity photo tutorial. Today we're going to learn how to make water drops, and at the same time we're going to learn how to mock up can effect with the water drops so we can see how it sells. So let's go ahead and start a new document. We'll go to File and New, and we'll make this 1920 by 1080. So the first thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and place our blank asset. So what I did is I just went online and found some pictures of like some blank can mock-ups. And so I got one, turned it into a PNG so there's no background. We'll just stick it right here in the middle. Nice silver can, easy to work with. All right, so we're going to need a background for this, and you kind of want the background to complement the color of your can. So we're going to create a blank pixel layer and bring it down below our can. We're going to come to our gradient fill tool, and we're just going to swipe across here. We'll add another node in the middle here. So let's start with this outer one here on the left, and we'll make it like a green. And we'll grab the center one and make it a little bit yellow. And then we'll grab this other one over here and let's make it green again so that we kind of go from green to yellow. Let's make this one a little yellower. Yeah, let's kind of go with that. We'll really kind of dress it up a little. All right, so we've got our background now. So now the next thing we need to do is we need to colorize our can. So we're going to come over here to our adjustments, and we're going to add in a recolor effect. We're going to just drag that down directly onto our can so it only affects the can itself. And let's change the hue on that to, kind of a greenish color. Let's change the blend mode from normal to linear burn, so you get a little more shadow there. And we can play around with the lightness to get it where we want it, and the saturation. That looks pretty good right about there. All right, next thing we need to do is add a label so that we have some kind of we know what we're getting here. So let's go to Artistic Text tool here, and we'll just drag out a letter here. And I don't know, what did I call this one? Can't even remember. What did I call it? Lime drop. Okay, so this is going to be a lime drop. And let's go ahead and center that text there. Let's change the font. For this I used Basement Grotesque, I believe. And then we'll just kind of fit it onto the can. And then let's go ahead and come to Layer Effects on that. And let's give it a color overlay. And let's make it kind of like let's make it yellow as well. Give it an outline. And we'll give it another outline on top of that. So we'll take the bottom outline and give it a different color. Let's make that kind of like a greenish color. Bring it out. So what we'll do now is let's go ahead and get this to fit onto the can a little bit better. So with this layer selected, let's go ahead and rasterize and trim it. And somebody always asks me, why do I rasterize and trim so much? Well, because lots of times when I don't rasterize and trim and then I go to apply an effect to it, something really wonky happens, and then I have to go back and start over again. So for certain things that I'm not going to change, I will go ahead and rasterize those almost right away. So with that being said, let's come over to the Mesh Warp tool. I'll just grab this bottom, drag it down a little bit so we can create a little bit of a rounding effect there. Same thing with the top. We'll bring it down just like a little bit. That looks good. Go ahead and apply that. And then the last thing we'll do to this layer is we're going to go to Layer Effects again, and we'll add an outer shadow to that. And we'll bring the radius up some, the offset, and give it a little more intensity, maybe a little more opacity too. That looks fine. And then we can see it's kind of sticking out over the edge just a little bit there. So let's just scale that down just a hair, and then we'll just kind of center it back up. So now we've got our label, we've got our can. Now we need to add in our water drops. That's what we're here for, the water drops. So let's go to the top of our stack here and add in a blank pixel layer. Let's come to our brush tool. We'll make sure that we're painting with white, and we want our hardness set to 100% and our flow set to 100%. I'm going to start off with kind of a big drop here because we're going to resize it anyway, but this way we can see what we're doing. So I'm going ahead and pop that on there so we have a white circle with sharp edge. And then let's come up here to the blending options, and we're going to take the fill opacity and we're going to turn it down to 0 so our circle disappears. But now we're going to go into Layer Effects, and let's add in an inner shadow, and we'll bring the radius up on that. And we're not going to mess with the offset. We want it to be like directly lit from the top, and we'll go up with the intensity just a little bit. And maybe we'll make the radius a little bit bigger, like that. All right. And then I've noticed if I don't do this next step, I do have problems. So what we're going to do is, again, we're going to rasterize and trim this layer, and hopefully, yeah, it worked that time. All right, so now we need to put in some highlights here. So let's come over to our brush tool again, and we're going to turn the hardness down. Let's turn it down to about 35. Let's turn it down to 40%. And we're going to bring the size of the brush down quite a bit here. And let's just right about here, center near the top. Let's go ahead and pop that out. And then using our move tool, I'm sorry, I need to go back there. I want that on its own layer. So I just backed out of that Command Z. We're going to add in a blank pixel layer. And now we're going to select our brush and do the same thing. I'm sorry, that needs to be on its own layer for right now. We will click right there, select our move tool, hold down Command and Option, and then drag out to the side to make it a little bit oblong, like that, symmetrically. And then let's come to our Mesh Warp tool. And we're just going to drag up on that bottom just a little bit so it kind of follows the contour, kind of makes it look like a bubble, and we'll go ahead and apply that. And then we're going to duplicate this layer. You can either hit Command J, or I'm just going to hold down Option and drag it down to here. And then I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. And I think I'm going to scale it down just a little bit. So Command and Option, grab onto the end here, bring it down, maybe flatten it out a little bit. And then we're just going to nudge it over to right about there. So now we've got highlight at the top, highlight at the bottom, and we have our drop. So these 3 separate layers. So let's highlight, well, now you know what we're going to do before we do anything. Let's rasterize and trim each one of these layers, because this is where I ran into a problem before. They're all rasterized and trimmed now. We can see we got rid of that little brush stroke thing there, and I think that's because it's still editable at that point. So now we can group these 3 layers together, and then we will go ahead and rasterize and trim those as well. So while we have it at this size, let's go ahead and kind of give it a little bit of distortion so it doesn't look like a perfect drop. So let's come over to the, again, to the Mesh Warp tool. And we're just going to do a little bit of dragging, not too much. We don't want to go crazy with it because, again, we can always go back and change some of these things. That's got a nice irregular shape there. We'll apply that. So now we can take and resize this down. And let's drag it over to our can. So you can see we had it over here on the green before, and it picked up the green background because it's translucent, so it's going to show whatever color it's above. So let's put it here on our can, and very quickly we're going to like resize it, and we're just going to make a bunch of copies of this and kind of change them around just a little bit. Okay, so bear with me. I'm going to speed this portion up. I'm just going to Option click, drag over like this. Maybe resize, move it around, and I'm just going to add a few of these with some rotation and just kind of variety. Okay, for the sake of the tutorial, that's all I'm going to do as far as the drops go. I do want to make sure that all the drops are above the lime drop logo, and they are there. So now that we have those, and you can put as many as you want, again, I'm just doing this for the sake of the tutorial, let's go ahead and group all those together, and we'll call those big drops. All right, so we've got our big drops now. So now what we need to do is we need to create some condensation on the can. And we're going to basically do this the same way. Let's go ahead and come back to our brush tool. We're going to come to the top of our stack here, add a blank pixel layer in, and we're going to make sure our hardness is set to 100% again. And these are going to be much smaller, so we'll just stick with what we have here for right now, and then we can resize it. Let's hit it once, and then come over to the blending options, and we're going to turn the fill opacity down to 0. Come back to layer effects, inner shadow, drag the radius of that up a little bit, intensity up a little bit, and now that we have that, let's go ahead and rasterize and trim that. Let's add another blank pixel layer in above that. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to take our brush tool, make sure that our hardness is turned down to about 40% or so, and bring our brush size down. And this one we're just going to put like one up here at the top, and maybe a smaller one right here at the bottom, maybe a little offset. These we're not even going to distort those. So let's go ahead and take that layer as well and rasterize and trim it, and we will group that and the drop together, and then we'll take and rasterize and trim that as well. And then we're going to come to our move tool, and we're going to shrink this down quite a bit. Let's really make it super small. I hope you can still see that. And we're going to put it over here on our can up here. We can barely see it, but it's there. See if I can zoom in a little bit. Yeah, you can see it there. And don't worry, because we're going to add in another effect to kind of pop these out again at the end. So what we need to do now with condensation, that usually runs up and down the can. So this is where we get to use one of our favorite tools again, our Move Duplicate tool. So we'll make sure that we have that layer selected. The Move tool is hot. We're going to hit Enter. We're going to select Duplicate. Insertion mode will be behind. And we're going to take our vertical and move it down just a little bit so it's just like right underneath the other bubble, like that. And then we're just going to increase our number of copies so that it comes down the side of the can. And we may go a little bit farther apart and fewer copies. Let's go with that. And we'll click OK. All right, so now we need to group all those together as well. So this is our first set of little bubbles. Now what we need to do here is we just need to kind of duplicate these and move them across, and you can either use the Move Duplicate tool or you can just do it with Command J or just kind of by hand, because I'm going to just real quickly do this by hand with just Option and click and dragging so that I can vary the height a little bit. So speed this portion up. Okay, so we've got all those groups spread out. So let's go ahead and group all those groups together. And then we will go ahead and rasterize and trim those as well. And we're going to do the same thing with the big drops because we're not going to move those around anymore right now. If you were going to move them around, I wouldn't do this yet. But for the sake of the tutorial, we're going to move ahead and move forward on those. Okay, so now that we have those rasterized and trimmed, let's go ahead and see about adding a little bit of drop shadow to those just to kind of bust them loose from the metal of the can a little bit. So starting with the big drops, let's go down to Layer Effects, and we're going to go to Outer Shadow, and we're going to bring the radius up a little bit, bring the offset up a little bit, and go straight down with it. And I'm really not liking that too much. Let's change the blend mode on that and see what happens with that. Let's go to Overlay. The radius a little bit, bring up the offset a little bit. Yeah, it's not really working that great with overlay. Let's try multiply. That works. Okay, so we're going to leave that alone for right now. And then what we can do, let's go ahead and try to add this to the smaller drops as well. See what happens. Okay, that darken those up a little bit. Now you can see how we have the little drops underneath the bigger drops, and that probably wouldn't be happening. So let's come to the small drops layer now. Let's go ahead and grab, you know what we'll do? Let's put a mask on there, layer mask. And then we'll come and we'll make sure we're painting with black. Grab our paintbrush, painting with black. If we zoom in here now and we look at these bubbles, the bigger bubbles, we can actually paint out the bubbles that are too close or overlapping those bubbles. I'll do that first. And so I'm going to speed this up a little bit too because you don't want to sit here and watch me do all of this. Okay, so obviously there might not be this much condensation on the can anyway, but it's also very symmetrical, almost too symmetrical. So for right now, the last thing I'm going to do to show you what I would be doing here is I would take this layer now that I'm happy with the density of those, and I would rasterize and trim it. Okay, and then probably what I would do is I would duplicate it, Command J, to bring them out a little bit more. I would take this layer and change it to possibly either add to give it a little more highlight or overlay. Which one do I like more? Or screen. Add. I'm going to go with add. All right. And then I am going to take both of those layers and group those together as well. Rasterize and trim it. And then the last thing I'm going to do with that layer is I'm going to come to the liquefy persona. And now using this, we can kind of like, you know, drag this stuff around a little bit to kind of make it not so perfect. And again, by doing this, we may be encroaching a little bit on some of these other bigger drops, so we can always go back in and erase those. So that's looking good right there. And the very last thing we're going to do is we're going to come down to our bottom layer here, add a blank pixel layer in, grab our brush tool, make sure our hardness is turned all the way down, painting with black, and we're going to bring the size of our brush up a little bit, just about like that. And right here behind the can, we're going to just pop it once, get our move tool, hold down Command and Option, Drag it out. And there you go. Pretty quick. Not as quick as I would have liked to have been, but you get the idea. Water drops. If you like this, please hit the like button or think about subscribing to my channel. Until next time, peace. Talk to you later. Bye.